All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Dispersing the Fog. I'm Adam Rogers here with Paul Palango. This is episode 47, and February 8th, 2026. We're going up against the Super Bowl live tonight, Paul, but maybe there's, we're not the only effort at counter programming for the Super Bowl, but hopefully we'll get a good audience for tonight and through the week. Lots to talk about, but how are you doing? How's your week been?
It was good, except Sharon and I, who avoid, we haven't been near hardly anyone, and now we both picked up bad colds or COVID, or I'm not sure what it is, but you might see me with my box of Kleenex in use here.
Okay, yeah, your voice has a little tinge to it. Not the voice we heard reading his book on the audio book. But Paul, you
Yeah.
weren't hanging around the Swiss women's hockey team, were you? There's some sickness going around the Olympics, I'm hearing.
No, I wasn't actually near the Swiss women's hockey team. I
No,
can
they didn't
I
swing
can
through
swear to
Chester.
that.
Okay. Well,
Although the Winter Olympics, I'm not a big Winter Olympics guy anymore.
oh no.
And you got all these sports that are, if you did them in a public park, you'd be arrested, like luge and skeleton and
Oh yeah.
whatever. Like, what are these sports? I don't get it.
I love the Winter Olympics, but the luge is great. Remember the old Seinfeld bit about luge is the sport where you could do it involuntarily and set a world record.
Yeah,
They just
yeah,
stick you on a sled and send you down the hill at breakneck speed, and
yeah.
yeah,
Send you down a tube of ice.
yeah. No, there was a Saturday Night Live thing last week about the same thing. It was luge or skeleton, and it was basically the athlete didn't want to be there and was you just yeah, forced into this life-threatening activity. But no,
So
it's
what exciting things have you done this week?
well, this week was a is a bit of a quiet week in terms of in terms of court and stuff. I was out snowshoeing yesterday, which was lots of fun. Not an Olympic sport. Uh, if I had to pick one, I'd like to do the biathlon, the cross-country skiing and the shooting one. But no, you know what was uh, just getting ready for the Super Bowl tonight and some of the stuff going on with that, but quiet week in the office otherwise. Uh, what about you got you got yourself involved in a hearing this week, or you got one coming up?
Yeah, I did something. As our listeners may recall, the Cameron Ortis case. Cameron Ortis is the former director of national intelligence for the RCMP, sort of number four on the ranks, and in 2019 was charged with helping a bunch of bad guys and cartels and leaking information, and that meandered through the courts. And then in 2000, 2 years ago yesterday, he was convicted and sentenced to 14 years in prison. And it sounded like this egregious thing, but then his parole hearing was coming up, and I was alerted to it. And so I applied to attend the parole hearing by video link. It was being held out in BC. It was supposed to happen on Thursday, and then on Tuesday, I got in from a note from the powers to be saying, "Oh, it's been canceled." And now no one
Can
will tell me why it was canceled, but what do you think?
Canceled is unusual. Adjourned might be more common. Uh, I'm curious to know what you were planning to say, but I'll come back to that. So it would seem if it's been canceled that there's been some perhaps agreement reached between the parties or with the parole board either to release him on parole, or maybe Cameron Ortis has decided that he doesn't want that hearing. Maybe he's been told he has no chance of getting parole, and he may as well, not try to maybe keep his powder dry until a later time, but maybe he's getting out.
That's what I think. I think he made, I just suspect he's a smart guy, and I think he probably made a compelling case that maybe they felt a little nervous about having people like me and perhaps other journalists sitting in on a video conference, seeing what his arguments are. And maybe they cut a deal. I don't know.
There's a lot of national security interests at play here. Michael Kovrig, one of the two Michaels, was supporting him as well. I think he wrote a letter originally at his sentencing hearing, saying what a stand-up guy Cameron Ortis has been.
See,
Maybe
my
that.
take on it is Ortis was a civilian groomed by previous commissioner. Um, and at the time he came under sort of investigation and scrutiny. All his rabbis, the supporters, had been left the force, and he was alone in this new regime. And there's the suggestion from inside that there's a lot of office politics to get him, and that he wasn't the bad guy that they made him out to be.
Well,
So I don't know, but that sort of it doesn't sort of make sense knowing the history of the RCMP as I do.
well, it seemed like during his trial, his lawyer was trying to advance this case in a way that he was actually the good guy, and he was, trying to do his work as a spy. And sometimes you have to, you know, do things that look like, if you're undercover, you're doing things that look like maybe you're on the wrong side, but you're actually still working for the Canadian government. If everybody's seen these movies, right, where, okay, well, if you do that, we're going to have to disavow you, but yes, go ahead and do it. It seemed like one of those kind of situations, right? And so maybe that they're just trying to conceal that or keep it down until they figure out how they can reveal some of these things in public.
Yeah, well, he's got a young family, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of days if they just quietly scoot him out of William Head Prison and send him home, or if he's going to talk or whatever. I'd love to have him on the show and basically ask him what happened in his, in his view, what happened. I'm sure you're not going to get anyone on the other side talking,
No,
but
but he might, if he's at this stage, especially if he gets parole, uh, depending on the terms of his parole, I wonder if one of the terms might be not to do interviews, but that would be an unusual term that would be fairly improper, I would think. Well, that's too bad, Paul, that you didn't get a chance to attend the hearing and see what's going on with it. But I guess they'll notify you, presumably if it gets rescheduled or whatever happens.
I guess. They never told me it was even going on. I had to find out myself and make an application, fill out the big form, tell them who my seventh grandfather was on my mother's side, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it's a it's a big story. Like I think it'll be interesting to follow, and just given the prominence of the story, it would be hard to imagine that things would just happen sort of quietly behind the scenes, then we wouldn't know about it. Like for example, if he does get released. So hopefully well, keep an eye on that one. Big story this week, Paul, is the stuff going on out of Toronto, and we have some guests coming today too. Edgar MacLeod, who's been on the show before, and Calvin Lawrence, both with 30 plus years of policing to kind of break down what's been going on up in Toronto. So people we'll get to that story in a little bit. Um, We've been in touch. Yeah, Edgar MacLeod and Calvin Lawrence. Anything to say about them, I guess, Paul, before we.
Well, Edgar, as people may know from the last time he was on the show, former police chief in Cape Breton. He's been a police chief on and off since he was 21.
Yeah,
He's well established. He was actually the head of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police. He's an educator at Holland College, teaching policing, frequent commentator, and still, plugged into what's going on in policing around around the country. And he has a lot of concerns. Calvin Lawrence uh, wrote a book called Black Cop. He started out on the Halifax police force, then eventually went to the RCMP. I think he spent 35 or 36 years in the RCMP. He's made a career out of training police officers, commenting on tactical situations. He's a frequent commentator on CTV on policing issues.
Yeah, so great to have those two on the show, probably in 10 or 15 minutes here. We'll talk about some of the stuff out of Toronto, the RCMP misconduct, 400 plus RCMP misconduct reports from 2024, and talk a little bit about the Portapic award situation too with those guys. So looking forward to getting our guests in. But Paul, we're going up against the Super Bowl, New England versus Seattle. Do you have a pick for tonight's game?
Not really. Seattle is going to be a tough team to beat. I mean, they're sort of brutally effective. But, New England has that sort of magic of a young quarterback and a lot of excitement. I'd like to see New England win. I like young teams, but excuse me.
We'll see. Those would be probably I don't really have a favorite team, but these are probably my two favorite teams in the NFL. Good to watch. I think it'll be a really good game. Always lots of other things on the sideline too, with the halftime show controversy and all that, and the commercials and stuff too. But what I was thinking about, Paul, is with with these games, they're neutral site games, right? And there's all kind of, we can talk about sports betting and all that stuff. It's a neutral site game, so nobody gets the home field advantage. And home field advantage usually gives a 3 point advantage in terms of gambling. But there was another story that came out this week about which I think reveals some home field advantage lessons, and that is to the judges of Alberta. You watch this now. Last week, the chief judges of the Court of Appeal, Supreme Court, or Court of Queen's Bench, they call it, and the provincial court in Alberta wrote a public letter talking about the independence of the judiciary and all this stuff. Well, why did they do that? It was a reaction to Premier Danielle Smith's comments on a radio show. And so this is an example, I'd say, of the judges dipping into political waters where they're not quite familiar. Because so I think Premier Smith has come out on top here in the sort of back and forth. So Premier Smith does this radio show every week. She takes calls from citizens of Alberta. She took one phone call about this case of Justin Bone. Justin Bone was out on parole, or sorry, out on probation, and one of his probation conditions was stay out of the city of Edmonton. Well, he was in the city of Edmonton and Chinatown and committed two homicides. He's now on trial for those. So the premier was asked about these on the radio, and but well, it wasn't it terrible that he was out on conditions, or he was out on bail. And she said something to the effect of, she said, "I wish I could direct the judges, honestly," and then went on to talk about how they get appointed. Well, that sort of innocent comment, and not really that inflammatory in my opinion, comment led the judges to write this letter, this public letter, like, "Oh, how dare she?" They didn't say this part, but basically, how dare she say that? We're independent and always shall be, in this kind of lofty language. So then Premier Smith turns around and says, "Oh, okay. Uh, well, we're going to withhold payment for paying these judges until we as Albertans get a say in how those are appointed. These are typically appointed by the federal government. She says she wants provincial input on them. And so this is sort of fuel on the fire of the constitutional crisis going on in Alberta with, independence referendum being, floated and petitions signed and all these things. So, mistake by the judges to get into unfamiliar waters on their opponent's turf. Uh,
Well, I mean, it is a problem,
yeah,
the appointment of judges and all these appointments, because for whatever reason, the Liberals have run the government the vast majority of times over the last 100 years. Like, no, 70% of the time, 80% of the time, liberals have been in power in Ottawa, and they've flooded the judiciary with liberal appointments, who have interpreted the law in a way that some people disagree with, and rightly
Yeah.
so. I mean, the one example, the Stinchcombe. That decision, driven by John Sapinka, appointed by the federal government, a defense lawyer, has caused all kinds of problems, according to police and prosecutors, with prosecutions across Canada. And there's no sort of, it could be argued there was no, they didn't factor in, the long-term effects of this thing and the way it's stretched out cases. We're going to talk about the Toronto situation, and part of that uh, legal precedence comes up in the way it's being handled right now. Well, maybe we'll get into that in the next section.
It just, and you're absolutely right. Another issue with Alberta is that all the judges, they're looking for, bilingualism as a requirement. Well, that's unusual in Alberta, or less common than it would be in central Canada. And so, anyway, it just seems like, well, yes, everybody has their lane and their jurisdiction, but it's still fair to criticize. If the premier thinks there's a bad decision, well, you can say so. And I thought the judges were being a little overly sensitive in this case. So,
Well,
uh,
you're right. The bilingualism requirement is in the provinces outside of Quebec and New Brunswick is, it's sort of a moot point. There's not that much. Northern Ontario, some on the Quebec border, but there's not much French spoken. In Nova Scotia, do you know what the stats are on, we have bilingual appointments, but do you understand how many people speak French as a mother tongue in Nova Scotia as a percent of the total population?
I would guess somewhere in the 10 to 15%.
No, more like 3 to 5%.
Jeez. Yeah, that's small then. But
Yeah.
and
I
so
mean, it's very, very small.
for anybody going from the Superior Court of the province to like the Supreme Court of Canada, you would be, if you're not bilingual, don't bother applying basically. And so you're
Yeah.
not getting necessarily the best and brightest of the judiciary that move on to the highest levels just because of that.
So it's
So
because
there's,
of
yeah.
politics, not because of merit or brains or whatever. And that has a long-term effect on how things work out. When you haven't got the best and brightest, you've got them there for political reasons. In any enterprise, it's a bad thing because in the long term, things get ruined, you know?
Yeah. So it's no, it's a bad issue there. So thought it would be worth describing some of that.
Excuse me.
We're used to having constitutional crises coming out of Quebec, although less so in the last couple of decades, really. But now it's popping its head up in Alberta. Uh, all right, Paul. So we've got Calvin and Edgar waiting. Do you ready to bring them in?
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's do that. So we've got a few things we want to get into with these guys. And let's see, there and there.
Hello.
There's Calvin. All right,
Hello.
Hello, sir. How are you?
doing
Hey,
great.
pal. Adam.
Calvin,
Can you hear
how you
me?
doing? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just trying to
Okay.
set this up so that I look.
You got a bit of light there on you, Calvin. We can hardly see you.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Um, I'm gonna have to.
I'll just maybe turn it around, Calvin. We'll
Oh,
be able
that's
to see what
Edgar. Edgar, you got light on you.
The light's always shining in PEI.
you got a bit of a halo there.
Wait, I'll put something over the window there.
Maybe you got the blue
Now,
jay.
is it still bad for me?
Yeah, you're sideways here, Calvin.
All right. I'm gonna just give me a couple of seconds, okay?
that's great. We can inspect their backgrounds while they're adjusting. Oh my goodness. Paul, while they're figuring that out, are you pleased with the lack of sports gambling with the Olympics at least? Compared to the Super Bowl, go from one thing where simply everything is gambled upon, including the color of the Gatorade and length of the national anthem to at
I
least.
just missed. I got a call there in the middle, but I had to disconnect.
Oh,
Say
jeez.
that again.
No, I was just comparing the plethora of gambling with the Super Bowl from the color of the Gatorade to the length of the national anthem compared to the Olympics, where you don't get that.
Yeah, I mean, all the pageantry, and and the other thing that gets me about the Super Bowl, it's whoever wins the Super Bowl, and I've said this before, is the champion of the world.
Oh
Well,
yeah,
they only play the game there. They only let teams from there play. Um, how can you be the champion of the world?
yeah, that's
And
it.
I've had this out with. That's better, Edgar.
Thank you. Do I look younger?
Yeah, actually, I think you've been you taking magic drugs or what?
Color.
We got Edgar there.
Hello, sir.
All right, Calvin. Yeah, just Calvin, maybe flip your screen around there so we can see you straight up here.
Kurt. How are you? Hi, Kurt. I'm just going on the podcast
Oh
now.
my goodness, boys.
Okay, all right, I'll leave you alone. I just wanted to make sure you
You're
do
sideways, Calvin.
Sideways.
Oh, yeah.
There you
Okay, I'll
are.
give you a call back and
Oh, okay.
There you are.
Here we go.
So here we
Technology.
have.
Okay.
As I said, I give you a brief introduction before describing who Edgar was. Calvin, how many years did you spend in Halifax and RCMP in policing?
8.5 years with Halifax City Police and 28 with the RCMP.
And what did you do in the RCMP?
I started off, they sent me to Newfoundland and I did detachment work there and did some drug work there, undercover drugs. Then I went to Toronto Drug Section. And from there, I went to protective policing. That was my niche, protective policing, VIP security. I went to Ottawa, the Prime Minister's Protection Detail. And from there, I went to diversity management and then off to Regina for 5 years, where I taught applied police sciences and police defensive tactics. From there,
Well, that's fine. And then you've written a
yeah.
book, Black Cop.
Yes, that was basically my story with emails and documentation of what was done in relation to trying to keep me from being promoted.
Okay, so let's go out. Adam, where we're going to start here?
Yeah, so I I wanted to start off maybe with just a look back. You guys, I know I've been following the show, and we've been talking the last few weeks about the situation in Portapic again. And news came out that there were some awards given out to officers and apparently some of the lawyers that worked on the case, but more kind of curious to get your views on those awards being issued to officers that were on the case, and also the fact that we don't know who got them. Any thoughts on that? Maybe start with you, Edgar.
Uh, no, I don't really. I know probably less than what you would know at this point. I was just surprised at the timing, but I don't know any of the details around the awards, what they're for, or so on and so forth. But
Nobody knows
Well,
what they're
nobody knows.
for.
Yeah, that's it. Is that
so
unusual in your experience, I guess, that nobody would know why people were awarded?
not necessarily. I mean, I think sometimes they make it all public and they disclose everything. And of course, then and sometimes they have private ceremonies. I really, I mean, awards, I guess, are important, especially to the people who receive them for whatever the reason I may be, but no, it's not something I pay much attention to.
Calvin?
What about you, Calvin?
I don't I don't think that publicizing awards, if they want to give out awards, then that's up to them within the
Yeah.
organization. But to publicize or giving out great awards after what happened and after the situation unfolded with the RCMP, uh, people are just going to be cynical about it. They're not going to say, "Well, great, somebody got an award." They're going to be cynical. So if you want to give out awards inside an organization, give it out.
Well, the thing about the awards that people sort of missed in the stories is that there was a person in charge of handing out awards for the RCMP in the organization who had the title, awards and recognition. And you know who that person was? It was the wife of Chief Superintendent Chris Leather, who was the original face of the RCMP disaster there. And she was Audra Guri was in charge of that. So I don't know if she had anything to do with giving these awards on the side or not, but it's caused a big stink in the family, saying how could they get awards for what they did? They never got in front of anyone. There was what, 300 and something recommendations?
Yeah, all the recommendations from the Mass Casualty Commission were directed at the policing and the RCMP, well, most of the significant ones, and quite critical of them. So how do you
And there's
square
like
those
three,
things?
it's like one third of the Mounties in Nova Scotia were up for recommendation for their performance during Portapic. One third, 300 and something out of 1,000 if they all showed up for work. And interestingly enough, it's come to, since the story broke, I hear that one of the Mounties who was on the ground that night, uh, Tim Mills, Corporal Tim Mills, who was an ERT member who was involved in the so-called rescue of Lisa Banfield at Leon Jodry's house, rejected the award. Said, don't even, I don't want it.
Wow.
I don't, he is quite bitter about it. And I got a note saying that he told the RCMP, don't email me anymore because he's personally disgusted. And I applaud him. Like he shows some integrity. And what do you think about it? Does anyone just want to comment on that or not? Or
Yeah.
move on? It doesn't.
Well, again, when I started, I think it's incredibly tone deaf given the circumstances and the context of what happened at Porta Peak. And I agree with Calvin. If they want to give out awards quietly in a ceremony amongst themselves, that's one thing. But it's being met right now with some cynicism, and it's a little wonder why. Um, so whether that points to something larger or not, I don't know. But that's where it's at. I certainly could see where it would be upsetting to all the victims, very upsetting. So I guess just on the timing alone is not good.
I mean, what did they accomplish? They didn't stop the killer. He killed 22 people over 13 and a half hours. They were not there, so the award must have been for something they thought they did right. And as I said, I wrote a book, Anatomy of a Cover-Up. Was it for continuing the cover-up and not dealing with the real issues? Holding tight against any criticism or any probing? I don't know.
Well, if that's what they're doing, it's incredibly poor judgment because I think it does little or nothing in that regard. In fact, it would even hurt them for judgment on poor timing. But beyond that, it doesn't speak directly, I guess, to the problems that are facing policing in Canada right now. Awards or no awards, there are some serious issues, fundamental flaws in the Canadian system of policing that has to be changed, and nobody's even talking about that.
Well, Edgar, you're right on there, Edgar, and that kind of coincidentally, I guess, or bad timing in a sense for somebody. We had the story come out as well that over 400, I think 443 RCMP officers were accused of misconduct in 2024. Um, I know there's what, 19,000 of them across the country, but that still seems like a lot. 20 of them were dismissed or left or resigned. Uh, Calvin, maybe I'll turn to you there. Does that tell you something about policing in Canada these days?
Okay, let me you like the group is sort of jumping in and they're picking apart issues, which is a good thing. But I kind of look from the start to what we have today. So I wrote an article, and you guys have maybe read it or something, the Alcoholic Dysfunctional Family, RCMP. And I've sent it to you. And what happens here is, first of all, I grew up in Halifax. I was a city policeman in Halifax. I policed people I knew. Halifax, Nova Scotia is a prime posting. In other words, there's no bad postings in Nova Scotia. When you live in BC and your wife is manager of the bank, your dollar's going to go a lot farther if the same thing happens in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, where I was born. So therefore, the RCMP being the RCMP, individuals will get posted there. When I first read Paul's book there, I know it went on, but it was flabbergasted to see who's supervising who. They're married, their sons, their daughters, whatever. And as I said in the news article, you're not going to police and supervise your son or your wife. Come on, we got to get real with this. So what happens is if you can look at a pyramid, and at the top is your commissioners and whatever, and then as you go down, there's your NCOs, and at the bottom are the constables. When you have something like the mass shooting happened, the whole structure is made so that orders go up the chain and down the chain. And that's one of the reasons why when something happens that's very serious, there's no mechanism in place to deal with it quickly. And to top that off, it's a command and control organization, and that is why they did not put out an alert. Because in my opinion, they were afraid, because if they put out that alert and they were wrong or they were criticized, they'd be punished. Punishment. And you go farther down the road and you look at somebody was brought to tears in the meeting where Brenda Lucky reportedly said that she wanted the guns named and what kind of firearms they were. That's a command and control mechanism. And the RCMP will not function in this day and age with a command and control function, but they still do it.
Should expand this too into the news today, this weekend about Toronto, and then get involved because it's all sort of
Yeah.
fits. It's all policing have a problem. And in Toronto, the story of you know, almost a dozen officers now in Toronto and Mississauga arrested or suspended without pay for their involvement with organized crime, car thefts, an attempted murder, an outrageous, egregious story. And we have to look at what happened. Like, how can this happen in a modern police force and nobody know about it? Do you have any thoughts on that, Edgar?
Yeah, I do. I mean, if we look at if we're flying at 10,000 feet level, looking at police accountability, public accountability of police, their behaviors, is that we have come, in fairness, the policing system has come a long way, but it's got an even further way to travel. So there have been major improvements since I joined policing in the 1960s or 70s, where there was almost zero accountability. I mean, cover ups were just people wouldn't even know what was going on because of the public. Now there is some legislation. The Police Act was passed in 1976 in Nova Scotia, for example, and that introduced some significant changes in the right direction. Police, for the first time, were being held accountable. There was a process in place, and so on and so forth. It took a few, there was resentment on behalf of all the police. And naturally, if you got a free reign to do whatever you want, you're going to like that system. So now they're starting to pass legislation that holds you accountable and there's a process in place. And that has worked quite well, actually. But I'm looking at it from the inside out that sometimes the public would overreact. There'd be stories in the media. Look at the police; they did this and they did that. Well, that stuff was going on for years. Now they're starting to hold people accountable. They're starting to release the names publicly. They're getting the investigations done. Police are being charged. And you might think that's a bad thing, but I would suggest that it shows that the public accountability part is starting to work, unlike it was in the 60s and the 70s. I mean, the stuff that I'm sure Calvin has heard stories and has been around to know that racism was rampant, and it still is to an extent. But when you look at what people went through back in the early 60s and then in the 70s, things are getting better. Got a long way to go. We got to keep on working on accountability. So the fact that something happened in Toronto and people are held accountable, I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing. It was bad what they did. The officers were charged. They'll have their day in court, and we just move on. So police chiefs, I'll give them credit. I can be critical in other areas, but this is an area where I think they've come a long way, and there is recognition amongst the police that they got to go further.
What about you, Calvin?
And there's the MP system of accountability or civilian oversight. It's completely different than local government, local police oversight. They have a civilian police board that, whatever, not an advisory committee nationally. I don't know how that works internally, but I know the other police forces have very, very strict laws around accountability. And I can remember where police chiefs would hold back, not cooperate, cover up. That's not the case today. Just about, how,
Well,
you know.
yes and no. I mean, what do you think, Adam?
Well, I was just going to bring in some of the facts of this case because I think most of our listeners would be at least familiar with it. But the worst part is that the police gave away the location of the home of a corrections officer who was, stopping the flow of drug traffic into the Toronto South Detention Center, had, been lauded on all sides for having done so. And then his house got shot up. And so, that was information provided by police officers to organized crime.
Right.
There's drug trafficking and extortion allegations. And by the way, Calvin, to your earlier point, two of the officers are father and son, the
Yeah,
John
well,
Natalie Jr. and Sr.
yeah,
Well, nepotism in policing is rampant, and I say that because when I was at Depot, there was it was like old home week every graduation, every 6 months graduation, because I saw people that I worked with because their sons and daughters graduated, and usually their sons and daughters were much better people than generally speaking than most of the members that I had worked with. Now, technology has replaced policing in the sense that people don't know how to talk. They don't know how to, police officers don't know or don't care how to talk. To the citizens, they're either afraid, they're talking to people who are afraid, or they're talking to people that are angry and they don't know how. So technology, such as not going to accident reports, taking reports over the phone, has diminished the policing aspect when it comes to dealing with the public. So the public are very upset. The other thing is, you saw the movie, You Can't Handle the Truth. Well, here's the truth. I think it was somebody from the SIU say the other day, well, somebody must have known about this and they should have reported it. Well, here's the deal. You tell the truth or you lie, your career is over. You tell the truth or lie, your career is over. You remove yourself from the wrongdoing, and that could be abusing a prisoner or whatever, and or you stop the person from doing what they're doing. Now, those are your four choices. And when you go and you report another police officer, they will leave you twisting in the wind. The managers, the people that you reported it to, they'll leave you twisting in the wind. And that's the culture of policing. You have to know the culture of the RCMP. You have to know the culture of Toronto Metro. The deportment, as I sent to Paul, the deportment, the supervision. Did you ever hear of a section NCO? Anybody there?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember what section NCOs used to do? They used to go around and make sure everything was up to scratch on each detachment.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a section NCO anymore.
No.
Okay, so this is what I'm saying. The supervision is done through technology. Well, we'll do this later, whatever. To compound that, the RCMP has always said, oh, well, everybody wants to be a Mountie. Well, guess what? Everybody doesn't want to be a Mountie in this day and age. So what happens is they get stuck and they start hiring substandard people. And I've seen that at Depot, where they bring in people just because they can't get anyone else. And they pass everything. But when they go out there in the field, it's going to be a disaster.
But the Toronto case, at first, you look at it and you think, okay, this is, the situation in Toronto with crime, auto theft. There's a great article in Toronto Life magazine this week, deep dive into the tow truck industry and how it went bad and all the problems and attacks on a lawyer and firebombing her office. Great article. Read it if you can. But it shows the intermingling of police and criminals in that city and how it wasn't. Nobody rooted it out. And you would have thought that the officers involved in this were low-ranking new people you were describing, brought in who were not vetted properly. I mean, they're vetting people now over the phone, not doing background checks. It's a big problem in the CSC, in the penitentiary service. 100 or so, at least 100 or so CXs, who are, basically your basic corrections officers, have been released in the not too distant past because they found out that they lied in their interviews that when they were hired that they didn't have criminal records. We thought that's the kind of people who are involved in this in Toronto, but it's not. This is people, this whole group at the heart of it are all these people who've been on the force 25, 30 years. They're sergeants. Most of them are sergeants.
But
So
don't
this
forget the
suggests that
unions.
there's a long-standing problem in the force that wasn't identified or uncovered. And you have to ask yourself, what else did they do?
But don't forget the unions. What part do they play in this? The unions
And the
protecting
union.
these people.
Oh, absolutely. That's the other part I was going to bring up. The union
So,
protecting everyone.
There's
In my book, Anatomy of a Cover-Up, I have an RCMP officer saying the real problem is the system now exists that good officers, as you were saying, Calvin, good policemen are afraid of bad policemen. It should be the other way around. But the union and the organization protects all this. I welcome your comments on it.
Well, I think, Paul, what you're saying is absolutely true, and there is a substantial amount of corruption, but that's true in all forms of, and this is not in any way supporting the police and what they do. They should be rooted out, charged criminally if possible, if they did something criminal or if it's behavioral. They should be rooted out. It starts with the top. It starts with the police chiefs across the country. It starts with the commissioner. You're responsible. You're setting the tone for the whole organization. And you need to work with governments to make sure that we have a process or a system to root out bad cops. And I'm saying it was bad 30, 40 years ago, but it's getting better. Now, if the public doesn't want to hear the cops were involved in some dirty work, some criminal work, then we want to have public accountability. It's ugly and it's messy, and the public should see it. And that's what's happening now, but they got a long way to go. Secondly, every oversight body, it's different in Nova Scotia, it's different in New Brunswick, it's different PEI, it's different in BC, it's different for the RCMP, and we're getting involved in integrated operations. That's all you hear now. Oh, we got to have police forces working together in an integrated structure, and everybody reports to somebody else within that system. They all have separate pieces of accountability. Um, and there are parts of this new accountability, what I'm saying, is working just fine. But it's no different. Do we think that politicians now are more honest than they used to be? Lawyers, medical people, you name it. There is an erosion of those things we've always valued. And I mean, we got to pay attention to that. But more importantly, there are other things that are happening in policing, and I'm one that's sounding a warning bell. If we don't fix the structure of policing in Canada, we're going downhill faster than a bobsled in the Winter Olympics. We're not keeping up. The criminals have surpassed us. The major issue in this country is drug trafficking. It's permeated our community. It is a pyramid that goes up into Upper Canada, cross countries, around the world, and international. I mean, Canada is recognized as being a key player, a very key critical player in this whole international drug operation. Between the Canadians, the Americans, the cartels in South America, and China. They know all of this. But we don't have enough RCMP officers focused and dedicated to those kinds of things. They're busy trying to keep the contracts staffed up. And Calvin made a very valid point. Not everybody wants to be a Mountie every month today. It's a difficult job, and people see that and say, hey, it's the same thing with policing. We're not getting. So those are the challenges we are facing. If you want to know what's going on in Mahone Bay, the drugs, where do you think the drugs come from in Mahone Bay, in Pictou County, or any of these places? They're not coming from Pictou. They're coming from outside. Organized crime, motorcycle gangs. New Brunswick is a haven for it. And that's what you're seeing every day in the news. What the hell is going on? Moncton, Jesus, it's wide open there in terms of crime, what's happening here. The citizens complaining every day. It's drugs. And we don't have the local police and even the city cops don't have the resources to deal with that. We count on the RCMP to do that, and they are shorthanded. Now,
wait, before you go on, Calvin, how does this? You wrote a piece the other day about the thinking of police or the organization of police and how they become susceptible to these kinds of problems.
Well, I would like to say, first of all, police chiefs and RCMP commissioners and deputy commissioners, they are police in name only. They are politicians first. And so that's something that people, I think, should understand. They're not out there every day checking to see what they're appointing other people to do that, but they're politicians first. It starts off with we had a deportment, the way we dressed. We didn't have beards. We didn't have long hair. Our shoes had to be shined. We looked like police service. Now they look like a police force. Some of the things that we wear, like the vest and gloves, well, yes, you need those. But when people walk around with sunglasses on their head, chewing gum, tattoos like a biker, uh, this turns off the public. The average person is not going to walk up to a police officer looking like that. And then the police officers don't learn how to talk. How much time do you spend on shooting and baton and pepper spray? Very little how to get voluntary compliance through verbal intervention. And I saw
Aren't
that.
people going to just say you're being old-fashioned there?
Yes, people have said, okay, I retired 2006. People say, well, you're retired, it's different here now. When is it old fashioned to try and get voluntary compliance through verbal intervention without using force?
Calvin, I see this all the time in these body worn camera videos that are, they're in every kit file now. And the officers, they'll be dealing with somebody on the street that's, that's elevated in a certain way, and they just say, you know, you got to stop. And they'll pick one sentence, one like 3 or 4 line sentence, and all right, lay down on the ground, hands behind your back, and there's no talking, there's no discussion, there's no effort to like, all right, well,
There's no effort to get
let's calm
voluntary
the situation down.
compliance.
It's just very directive, directive, directive. And they
That's
just
right.
repeat themselves.
And because they don't know any better, because they haven't been taught any better, or they don't care.
Yeah.
I've worked with police officers who would start a fight in the church. I mean, once they come in, others they talk and talk. They used to say to me, "I talk too much" in Halifax City Police. They say, "You talk too much. Just do it, right?"
Wow.
And they know I wasn't a coward because I was a Canadian amateur boxing champion. So I had my fights in the gym. I didn't feel like going out and fighting in the street. So I talked to people. And the other thing, of course, if you're talking city policing, is walking the beat. Cops don't walk the beat, so they don't learn. The way you learn is you walk the beat. You learn how to deal with people, and if you walk a beat 3 shifts for 6 months, you will know everything that goes on in that community. Everything.
Well, it's sort of the thing I learned in journalism. It's sort of analogous to what I learned in journalism. In my first days of journalism, one of the trainers at the Hamilton Spectator, Barry Williams, says, every day you come to work, you will see a story. And so they sent us out on this training exercise. Okay, now everybody go out and go for a walk and see what story you could find. Isn't it the same sort of thing? If you're out there, you see things, you should be alert and you should see it.
Good point, because there's an art to walking the beat, and there's an art to talking to people to get information without letting them know you're getting information. And there's, of course, what you're doing by walking the beat is interacting with people that gives you restorative justice immediately. Immediately, it's restorative justice, 95% of the time.
And that's the kind of thing that leads to actual community safety, I would say, Calvin. There's two other quick aspects of this Toronto situation. One is kind of touching on what you're just saying, though. And there seems to be a tension because it seemed like the officers were very, they were local. They were maybe getting to know the tow truck drivers too well. And they were too connected in a sense to the community, and that led to some corruption. Whereas if you had a lot more turnover, maybe you wouldn't have those connections. So there seems to be good aspects and not so good aspects to having that tight connection. But the second part, and Paul, I think maybe they're listening to the show, these officers have been suspended without pay. So that seems to be a major change, or an important change at least, in how, I guess, oversight, how, police accountability might manifest itself in Canada. So interested in thoughts on either one of those topics.
Well, I believe that every police officer should have pay until they go to court. But you have special courts for police officers, just like you have special courts for different groups. You have special courts for police officers, and you do it in a timely manner. You do a timely, accurate, open as possible investigation, and then you tell the truth no matter who it helps or who it hurts. And you do it in a timely manner so they're not sitting home for 2 or 3 years getting funding. You can do it within a year. You can do it within a month. It all depends on what the charge is. And I believe that they should have special courts for police officers.
I think that's a great idea.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Edgar, the would you have any concerns about, like, one of the things that strikes me about Toronto is that what was the glue that held all these people together? They all play on the same hockey team, bowling league. Were they a part? We've talked about this in the past. In England, for example, one of the big problems has been historically and documented is Masonic lodges with police and criminals in the same lodge, and that's where they get together. You don't talk about that in Canada, but is there any sort of way in to that you could envisage in the Canadian policing system to look at some of these, to have forces look at the private lives of some of their officers if they're getting entangled with criminals, or or is that just, is it all based on good faith or whatever? I mean,
I'll bring you back to the old expression that power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. The police are constantly put in situations where they can go one way or the other, and they have to go back to ethics and their faith and what they believe in, and so on and so forth. That's what we have to put a lot more emphasis on in policing, especially at the recruit level. But we're continuing all the way along. They're confronted with making decisions. And unfortunately, like any other profession, including their faith professions, ministers, priests, I mean, some of them don't, they veer off that and they go across that line into criminal activity. That's what we can control, the police chiefs and others, and they have to deal with those individuals because it's like a cancer in the overall body. And the fact that you're seeing more people being charged is, it means that at least somebody's dealing with these individuals, and they're turfing them out of our profession. Um, there is a lot. I don't. I look at accountability of police with 100% agree. By the way, just with what Calvin is saying about communication. Think about that. Our kids, go back to kids coming out of high school. Are they really taught this in school, how to communicate effectively, how to read, write, get up and speak and hold your head up and be proud? Jesus, they're all wrapped up in their devices and all that. They don't, that's where we're starting behind it. So I agree wholeheartedly with Calvin. But honestly, on the inside now, and I know I'm outside the system now, but they put a lot more emphasis, especially the municipal police, on communication. They are working with other outside agencies that specialize in interpersonal uh, communication, cross-cultural communication, how to communicate with indigenous people with different cultures, that words have different meanings. The police are doing a lot of that, and the governments are doing their best to stay on top of it. All of that is true. They got to keep doing more of that. Support what Calvin's saying. You got to learn so much on the beat. But again, I'll go back to where you're going to hear me, Adam and Paul, till the cows come. The structure of policing needs reform, major reform, because we can't keep up with the crime, the organized crime, and the drugs. And we can talk and be nice about all the way, but until we fix that, and you'd say, well, okay, government should just fix that. No, it's not just governments fix that. We have serious healthcare crisis. We have an education crisis. We have an economic crisis. Grace, watch the news every day. It's like, oh my God, we got no money left. Our debt's going out of control. So those changes have to be made internally. And politicians have not shown any willingness to sit down and talk about policing in this country as a group.
Well,
wait, before you go on, one of the things you said, this worked because there was an investigation, but the investigation in Toronto was mounted by York Region. I
Right,
mean, York Region is a large police force. People don't
right,
realize Toronto is Toronto Police, Police Toronto, and then there's regional forces to the west,
right,
Halton, Hamilton, to the
right.
north, to the Peel region, to the north, York region, Durham region to the east. These are all pretty substantial police forces. They took it
Yeah.
upon themselves to do this investigation for whatever reason, came across these Toronto cops, and you still ended up with they probably told the Toronto police chief that they were investigating him. So you have the Toronto police still investigating the Toronto police, which is not optimal. Where are the other higher levels of police, OPP, RCMP in this? It's not a perfect system by any way, and I don't think there's any sort of oversight because the York Regional Police seem to take this upon themselves and good on them.
Well,
But
I can be critical of my colleagues as chief of police, but that's the one thing I've never heard any. Once you get something that involves corruption within the police department, most chiefs will right off the top appoint another service to go in and keep their hands on. That happens automatically, and that's a good sign that Halton was involved in it. They had to have the authority from somebody. So somebody was on the ball to make sure even the optics of Toronto is not good. So I agree with it. They should not be, and I think you're going to see a lot more come out of that investigation very soon. And if the police chief or anybody who's involved in it, that will be determined and that will be dealt with. I'm convinced of that. So
Edgar, I
Calvin,
see that the Toronto Police they've asked that the review be conducted by Ryan Teschner, who is Ontario's first Inspector General of Policing.
mhm.
And that always seems it strikes me my spidey senses went up. It's almost like asking for a particular judge on a case. It's like, well, if you're asking for that person to do it, then that person probably shouldn't do it because there's likely a reason to ask. But
well, Teschner was also he was on the police services board that appointed the chief, and
yeah.
then Doug Ford moved him over to this new position to oversee the police. You're right. Should he be the guy doing it?
Seems might be a bit of a problem. The other one, Edgar, just picking up, you're talking about the political level. We've had the misfortune in this country for the last 10 years plus of one of our most prominent politicians on this beat has been Bill Blair, who seems to keep failing his way up. He was chief of police, and he was a bad chief of police in Toronto, I think, by most accounts. He was a bad public safety minister, and now he's been appointed to be a bad high commissioner to Britain. Maybe now that he's gone, maybe things will change on the political level, but that seemed to be a hindrance for some time.
Yeah. Well,
Calvin, your thoughts on this?
Well, if you pick police officers from the human race, you're going to have police officers that do something wrong. However, you have um, you have supervisors. Now, for example, myself and other examples I can give you, take out race, take out gender, take out sexual assaults, take all that out and say, okay, this happened. The reason is unimportant. What are you going to do about it now? Well, what are we going to do about it now? We're going to settle, for example, and we're going to make the settlement, part of the settlement, a promotion. Are you qualified? Who cares? Who knows? We're going to make you a sergeant or we're going to make you a corporal, and out you go into the field as part of a settlement. We're going to manipulate. We're going to disguise. We're going to do all of these things. So it's yes, you're going to have police officers who get into trouble. But right to this day, I retired in 2006. Last month, I got another call from somebody who, because of the way I use certain aspects of finding out what was going on, and people call me, and I've been called from then till last week. So people say, well, you're gone now. Things have changed. No, things have not changed. Individuals are not being held accountable. They're not being supervised. And this is the reason that you have, it might have been 200 rather than 400 if there was proper supervision. But there's always going to be, to this day, there's always going to be police officers who get into trouble, and there's always going to be the political wing trying to cover it up. And until that changes, you know, and you're going to do the right thing at the right time to the right people, nothing's gonna change.
Well, it is an example of how, politics. I think Edgar's alluding to that, and you're alluding to it. The real issue is the politicians in government who have infected policing with politics rather than having the police operate under the rule of law. And a lot of the problems seem to emanate with the softening of the attitude toward criminality. I mean, I don't know if I'm wrong about that, but that's a shortcut to to describing the issue. But we're getting near the end here. Any last thoughts here, Edgar?
What? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I think first of all, governments need to stop throwing money into policing blindly, thinking that, well, the answer is more officers, more this, more that. We need to get back to transformational change. There is no more money. We've got a healthcare system in this country that's starting to fall apart. We've got defense, national defense, so far behind. So eventually we got to realize, government, we can't keep throwing money. Taxpayers have sent a message to all governments at all levels. We can't afford tax increases. So that means they've got to sit down, government to government, feds to the provinces, provinces to the municipality, because all three governments have a big, big role to play in policing in this country. It's the way we've been set up since Confederation. And the idea of having one police force with a major hand in one area and somebody else, it's inefficient and it's ineffective. It's as simple as that. And some of these are simple fixes. They're not complicated. In Pictou County, you got all these towns clustered around within a mile of one another. For God's sake, do you think that's efficient to police that community? That 5 police chiefs or whatever? No. It's just common sense combined. And look at the problems in Portapique, the communication between the RCMP and the Truro police. That would eliminate that if you start to bring down and consolidate our assets that we have. That's management 101. You know, if you don't have extra money thrown at you, and what am I going to do with all this money? Then you gotta look at your structures. You gotta look at governments like the way they have it now, because now they can blame one another. Not my responsibility. It was a provincial responsibility. That's a local government responsibility. And the people that have the biggest responsibility in this country, the governments that have the biggest responsibility, are local governments. And guess what? They're not at the table with the province and the feds. They are not at the table. They're not even consulted. The money comes down. The municipalities in this country are subservient to the provinces. So if they're not thinking straight at the provincial level, then it falls right down to the local level. And these are things, local police chiefs, local councils. Now, what the hell is going on? Like I say in Moncton, the crime there is just crazy. And look at the bottom of all that violent crime is drug abuse. Simple.
And that's an RCMP jurisdiction.
Yeah.
It is an RCMP, but somehow we've determined that the city's got to put money into it and the province, but we don't know what, there's no framework or a policy to support that kind of integration that needs to happen. The integration should follow a policy framework so that we can't have any confusion or ambiguity as to what the federal government's role is responsible. Right now, there's in provinces, if I ask you, anybody in Nova Scotia, how many provincial police officers are there in Nova Scotia? Well, good luck trying to get the answer to that basic question. How many do you want in your contract and how many you receive? Well, we can't talk about that. That's operational. But positions are vacant all over the place. Officers are called out on time and a half or double time. And these are big salaries going in there. Across the country, we're talking millions and millions of dollars being wasted in overtime.
Okay. Calvin, your last thoughts?
When I was in 1995, I was in charge of the bodyguard team for the economic summit for Bill Clinton. Prior to that, uh, we trained the Halifax RCMP. And at that time, the Dartmouth City Police and the Halifax City Police were at war, and they didn't want the motorcycles from Halifax going over to Dartmouth. So now you've got different jurisdictions that hate each other. They won't work together, and you saw that with the mass shooting. And it could have been much worse because they wouldn't work together. So expanding on Edgar's thing there, I think that there's a number of things that has to be discussed. There's the mobbing effect. There's a number of cases that have to be looked at in relation to people getting promoted for doing bad things. Until such time, I have a picture. I'll just say this: I have a picture of the commissioner of the RCMP hugging the prime minister. Now, if there was a investigation required that would involve the government, how do you think, as you saw years ago with the government, some of the investigators, and they got a corporal, a low-life corporal to lay the charges because the officers were afraid that they'd be in trouble and they wouldn't move up. So how do you think that's going to shake out when things have to be done and the hard decisions have to be made? That's all. That's my statement on it. Nothing's
That's
going
a
to
good point.
change. Nothing's going to change until such time as whatever police organization, the RCMP, whoever, is away from the government
But you're
on their
seeing
own.
mayors, premiers,
Yeah.
and prime ministers all hugging top policemen and the policemen hugging back. Or
Yes.
standing there and lending support, and that shouldn't be. But anyway.
That's a great point, Calvin. And yeah, we've talked about that before here with the Nova Scotia Premier and the RCMP going to the Boston
And
train
and
ride and stuff.
unions,
Yeah,
unions, unions are endorsing political parties, police unions.
yeah, yeah. That's a big problem too. Listen, guys, we could talk all day, of course. Last question before we let you go. You got a Super Bowl pick?
I'm
Patriots all the way.
I'm going to abstain because I don't follow it closely.
Okay, good enough. No, that's great. Listen, want to really appreciate you. Thank you for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts, experience. You guys have decades of experience in this and have seen it, backwards and forwards. So thank you very much for coming on and sharing your thoughts with us and our audience. And I'm sure they really appreciate it.
You're
Thanks, guys.
welcome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
All
See
right.
ya.
We'll see you again. All right.
Okay.
So Paul, I was gonna actually, I was gonna, I was gonna say to Calvin when he was talking the movie quote, he was talking from A Few Good Men. I thought he was gonna go with. There's a little detail in that Toronto case. One of the alleged criminals is a guy named Thomas Papard, but he's known as Frank or Frank the Tank from from Old School. Do you remember that movie with Will
Yeah.
Ferrell?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there,
Well,
that's 20 years ago. But
it
whenever
really
somebody
bought
went a little crazy, yeah.
The Toronto case, as I said, you have to ask yourself what was going on that got York Region probably found out about from the people they arrested over the attempted murder of the corrections officer supervisor who was impeding the sale of drugs in the local jail. Uh, that's a big business. I think it may well have been at the root of what happened in Portapique in Nova Scotia. Drugs going into the prison. Something happened. Um, it's a big issue. York Region got involved in it and did an admirable investigation, but it still bothers me. If you've got these officers who were, the one guy, Madeley, John Madeley Sr., him and his son were both arrested. His nickname on the force is Mad Dog. Uh, he was cited for one time, 10, 15 years ago, racing through Toronto with lights and sirens because he was late for a union meeting. Since he retired, he's been charged in another matter involving gambling and illegal gambling. There's the tow trucks. These guys were involved in sort of the most heinous crimes and the most destructive crimes. I still ask, what was the glue that held them together? Was it just the money? Uh, the god of money, everyone's in it for the money, or is it just people don't have any integrity anymore, any standards?
Yeah, it would be interesting to see. I mean, this investigation, one would think, is going to go on for some time, and maybe hopefully we'll learn more details about those kinds of things. But these service clubs and other kind of organizations outside, at some point, if they're seen as sort of I don't know,
A
a
nexus
nexus
for,
for people that can meet and, quietly have those discussions, well, then maybe that's got to be
it's a
a
big
problem.
issue. Like I talk to cops all the time, and they talk about, oh, you couldn't get anywhere in the Calgary force unless you were a Mason, and other police forces the same.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, the history is quite clear. If you go to the United Kingdom and look at everything from the demise of the flying squad to all kinds of other big scandals, they found were rooted in Masonic organizations where the police and the criminals came together and they had a bond there that was higher than their duty they felt to the police officer. They had a duty to their fellow brothers
Yeah.
and not to the rule of law. And I think that's a big issue. And in Canada, we say, oh, well, that's their private time. I don't think it is. I think that there should be hard and fast rules about who you hang. You've got to have some integrity somewhere. And
Well, when
we've sort of lost that sense of what do they call it? Integrality.
when you're the police and you have the right to arrest people and carry a gun and do all those things that they have in their power, then you have, with responsibility, comes a little loss of privacy rights too.
And
And
that's why
as
you
we
get a
talked
big
about.
pension and all the
Yeah.
other stuff you get. That's what you get for signing up. It's not just about the money. It's a matter of integrity and responsibility and morals and a duty to uphold the rule of law. And if you're hanging around with criminals and trying to make a buck on the side, you're not getting any sympathy from me.
No. Well, all right. Anything on the horizon now this week other than watching the luge finals at some point in the next few days?
As I said, I don't watch
No.
any of those things anymore.
No, it's good. So we'll be watching this the Toronto story certainly, and the see if there's any further shots fired in the Alberta judges versus Premier Smith battle, and then I'm sure there'll be other things that come along as well. By the way, Paul, I just got a message today from my local bookstore that my Lisa Banfield book has finally come in,
Finally.
so I can go in and buy it, and maybe a day late and a dollar short for that, but I might still read it. We'll see.
Well, it won't take you long.
Yeah, no, I guess not. All right. Well, until next week, everybody, enjoy yourselves and enjoy the Super Bowl if that's your thing, or the Olympics, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.